I'm thrilled to be back. This is a fantastic place. Congratulations on your new campus. So now that we can no longer say at Harvard, we have a beautiful campus to offset our bad weather because you've got both. But it's a pleasure to be here. And I did meet Peter Sims, by the way. Peter has an excellent new book out called Little Bets that he wrote on his own, talking about the importance of how real innovation should take place in organizations and making small bets instead of betting the farm on one large R&D program. I've had, it's interesting, I've seen myself as a leader, but the last 10 years I haven't led anything. But I'm really excited about having a chance to work with leaders like you, and I've decided to devote myself for this period of my life to that because we've gone through what I would call a rough patch in leadership. When I was at Medtronic, we had the wind at our backs. That was the 90s when leaders were looked at as heroes and things were going our way. Innovation was popping up all over. We did innovate some major new medical therapies at Medtronic for heart failure and minimally invasive cardiac surgery and Parkinson's and cerebral palsy and back pain and a lot of very, very exciting things. But the thing I think I'm proudest of at Medtronic is we set a metric of saying, instead of looking at our market cap, our stock price, or revenues or profits, but how many people were restored to full life and health, which is a mission of Medtronic. And we finally got it down from 1.5 minutes to the time I joined the company until the time I left, down to 1 every 3 seconds. So today, while we're sitting here, every minute that goes by, there'll be 20 people being restored by a Medtronic product. And to me, that's what it's all about, because I think so many companies have lost sight of why they went in business in the first place. They lost sight of their mission and their purpose. In fact, I wrote an article recently for Fortune talking about leadership's lost decade, because it's been a very rough patch, I think, for leadership. And this is my generation. In fact, when I left Medtronic, it was about the time that we had the dot-com decline, but we also had Enron and WorldCom, and it wasn't just those companies with corruption. It was the 100 companies that had to restate billions of dollars of earnings because they had cooked the books and destroyed a lot of truly great companies, some of which are coming back, like Xerox and Bristol-Myers. But it was my generation of leaders that led to that. And so my hope is that your generation of leaders is going to do things differently and not get caught up in playing the game. I think we also got caught up in a lot of flawed economic theories, the idea of shareholder value maximization, which morphed to short-term value maximization and destroyed much of the American pharmaceutical industry because people were playing the short-term game. And the perfect market theory and principal agency theory, and fortunately these theories we now realize the flaws in them with the meltdown in 2008, which for you must have come as a real shock, but I think it was actually an appropriate awakening of what it takes to build great companies. And so that's what I'd like to talk about today. In many, many cases, I think the real essence of the problem was that we got caught up with the leader as hero, and we tried to find a rock star to run our companies. We often went outside. People didn't know the company, know the business. And boards, honestly, were choosing the wrong leaders for the wrong reasons. They were choosing people more for their charisma than their character, more for their style than their substance, and more for their image than their integrity. Well, if you choose people for things like image and style and charisma, why are you surprised when you don't get people with integrity? And that's what we had. We put way too many leaders put their self-interest ahead of their institution. And to me, that's the greatest sin. I've never owned my own company. I suppose if you own your own, you can do what you want to, although most people own their own company have a very long-term view. But, I feel like you always have to put the organization first. And anyone who doesn't do that and rises to a high position and takes advantage of their power has really failed as a leader. And I think so many leaders failed. So how is your generation going to do it differently? That's what I want to challenge you today. What kind of leader are you going to become? And how are you going to use your leadership gifts? So I have 3 questions for you to think about. The first of all is, what kind of leader do you want to become? And underneath that is, where do you find the passion to lead in the first place? That's the first question. I just want you to reflect on this because I'll come back to each of these. The second one, how are you going to develop yourself as a leader? Leadership is like anything else. You have to practice it every day. You don't just show up in a leadership role at age 45 and think you can lead. I had my first opportunity to lead an organization, Litton Industries, that started the consumer microwave oven business back in 1970 when I was 27 years old. Somebody bet on me at a very young age, and I made a lot of mistakes, but I tell you, it was a fabulous experience. You learn by having those experiences. You don't learn just by studying other people's experience or studying textbooks. You learn by actually doing it. And so how are you going to develop yourself? If you're going to be a great athlete, you certainly wouldn't play in the World Cup if you didn't practice every day or ride in the Tour de France, nor would you try to play the cello at Carnegie Hall unless you practice every day. Well, leadership is the same thing. So I just urge you to get into leadership roles as soon as possible and constantly be processing your leadership. I'll talk more about that. And the third question, most important of all, how are you going to make a difference in the world? What do you want to do to impact the world? We've seen many leaders right in this geographic area where people are doing it every day. How are you going to impact the world? Rather than giving yourself over to somebody else telling you what to do, how are you going to make that impact? Because we desperately need contributions of leaders. The complex problems we have today, like global peace, global health, education, the environment, energy policies, healthcare, cannot be solved. It cannot be solved by any one company, one individual, any one sector. We really need people, collaborative leaders who can bring people together to really make a difference in the world. So that's the challenge I want to give you today. So let me talk about how I think leadership is going to be different in your generation. Because I think what I grew up with was a hierarchical view of leadership. I didn't have that view, but that's what was visited on us. It came out of the 2 world wars, the Great Depression. You know, we thought General Patton was some kind of hero, the all-powerful person on top. We venerated those leaders. And I think today we created, as a result, a lot of leaders created hierarchy, bureaucracy, rules, and regulations. You know, you don't want to work in those kind of organizations. I don't know any young leaders today that want to work in those. In fact, most have rejected that notion. And I think that's a good thing. You have knowledge workers working for you. And I used to say to people, middle managers, if the people working for you don't know more than you do, then you got the wrong people. You need to get some new people because you want to have more talented people around you than you are in every single position. But I think the most important thing is in organizations today, we fooled ourselves by saying people are only interested in money. That may be true in some sectors, it may be true at the top, but I can tell you, and you have an organization served on the board of Target stores, 350,000 people. People make $1 or $2 over minimum wage. I can guarantee you, it isn't just about money, it's about meaning. It's about the purpose. Think about your work. You're going to spend more time at work than you do anything else in your life. More time with your families, more time in your leisure time, probably more time you will sleeping. Don't you have a right to have meaning in your work? Doesn't everyone who works in the organization? People are not just gnomes or cogs in a wheel. You need to think about, how do you provide that meaning? At Medtronic, the most significant thing we did is every December, we got all of our employees together, Minneapolis employees, as many could get into a large atrium auditorium, not fancy like this, just a big atrium area, about 3,000 to 4,000 people, and another, these days, 25,000 or 30,000 people watching around the world on web streaming. And we brought in 6 patients, and these 6 patients told their story of what it had meant to have a Medtronic product. Their doctors came with them, introduced them, but they didn't tell the story. And it was a very impactful experience. I'll never forget the first one I went to. 5 people came up. One of them was a man in his 50s who had had intractable back pain. He'd failed 5 surgeries. And he said, I was alcoholic, drug addicted, anything to stop the pain. And then he said, then I got your stimulator. And he actually broke into tears. He said, it took my pain away. I just realized back last March for the first time what it was like to be pain-free. First time in 10 years. And then a young boy came up who was the same age as my son, Jeff, 18 years old from Pittsburgh, but there the similarities end. He described how he had cerebral palsy from birth. Every year he had surgery. Finally at 16 he denied future surgery. His body got very rigid and stiff. His motions quite spastic. He had to pull out of a mainstream school. And then he smiled and he said, and patted his belly and he said, then I got your pump. It's my friendly ally, which put an older drug directly in his spinal column and restored him. Didn't take away his cerebral palsy, but gave him life. And he said, now I'm back in a mainstream school. Got rid of the wheelchair. I can walk in arm braces. His speech patterns are corrected. I'm going to college next year. I got a girlfriend. He wasn't corrected, but he wasn't cured, but he had a life. And that's when I got what Medtronic really does. It was about the mission of the company. And that mission can apply to any organization you work in. It can apply to a financial services organization, it can apply to a consulting firm, certainly can apply to all the high-tech companies around here. So I'd like to describe 21st century leadership in 4 words, very simply. Align, empower, serve, and collaborate. Let me describe briefly what I mean by each of those. The toughest job of a leader is not getting the numbers right. I dare say any half dozen of us could go off and figure out how to get the numbers right for just about any company in the world. All you have to do is cut 20% of the staff, reduce everyone else's salary 10%, get rid of bonuses, cut the R&D 30%, cut the marketing 20%, and I'll guarantee you the stock price will go up. That's what's happening with Pfizer right now, real time. Okay? But you won't have a company if you do that. The toughest job of leadership is to getting people aligned around the mission and values of the company. And how else can it be? Think about it. What's the hardest job we have? Running a global company. You got people all around the world that are raised in different cultures. You're expanding quickly in Brazil or in China or in India. And you have to convince people that your mission and your values are really essential for the future of the company. You can't run multiple value systems in a company. You can have different norms, but you have to have one value set so that people can work collaboratively all around the globe. The second thing is leadership is not about exerting power over other people. That's a very old-fashioned notion. Most popular course at Harvard used to be power and influence. Now no one takes it. It's about having the capacity to empower other people to step up and lead. And I'll guarantee you an organization of empowered people from top to bottom will outcompete a tops-down, power-based organization every time. Think about where you want to work. And so are you that kind of empowering leader? I remember visiting a company, a Medtronic company out in Southern California in Irvine. They make heart valves. They take pig's hearts, and about 1 out of every 10 pig's hearts produce a valve that can be used to replace a failed human or aortic or mitral valve. And this was heavily backlogged. Took 18 months to train new workers, a lot of newly immigrated immigrants from Southeast Asia. And I met the top worker in the facility, a woman named Trin. She was from Laos. And so she had all her tools on the bench. I said, Trin, I'm trained as an industrial engineer. Tell me how you do your work, because we need to accelerate this, make it more of a science than an art. She wouldn't look down at her bench. She said, Mr. George, let me tell you something. My job is to make heart valves that save someone's life. And if I do that job well, a lot of people can be restored. She said, I make 1,000 valves a year. I make the quality decisions here. There's a big manual. Yeah, we've got a manual. But my criteria, is that valve good enough for my father, my husband, or my daughter? And if it's not, it doesn't get by me. She said, you know, for you, 99.9% quality is considered very good. But if one of the valves I make fails, someone's going to die, and I could never live with that. So every one of those 1,000 valves got to be perfect. But she said, you know, I think, well, when I go home at night, I'm thinking about those 5,000 people who are alive and well in the world today because of the heart valves I made. Now, this woman has no direct reports. Do any of you doubt that she's an empowered person? She's actually an empowered leader because she's the one that people go to for quality advice. She's the one that does the training in the facility. So leadership today is about having people like Trin throughout your organizations to empower other people to step up and lead. That's the only way we're going to have great organizations. The third thing is leadership is about service. It's not to serve the shareholder. It's to serve the people, the customers, the patients, the clients that you serve. That's what it's about. It's not serving the shareholder. And if you don't get that, your company will never create shareholder value. If you get that, if you create better products, and any company today that can't make a product that offers better value, better technology, better innovation, or a better service than their competitors, eventually go out of business. Look at General Motors. It took 50 years to go out of business, but it was sure as you can stand here, they had to go out of business before they could get it right because they didn't understand whom they were serving. The fourth thing is leadership is about collaboration. Okay? And the new model is how do we have a collaborative model? Sam Palmisano was one of the pioneers at IBM, did this about 7 years ago. And he changed IBM away from a hierarchical model and to a fully collaborative model. And he's totally transformed that company, and they've done extremely well in that time period because it's about global collaboration. They get compensated on what kind of collaborators they are. So I think the great organizations and the great leaders, of which I hope you'll be one, understand how to align people around mission values, how to empower other people to step up and lead. Recognize that leadership is about serving your customers and serving your employees, and finally, it's about collaboration. And I think in that is the essence of the kind of leaders that I hope you'll become and will think seriously about becoming. I wrote a book, as was mentioned, True North, with Peter Sims. We interviewed 125 leaders, many of them from the West Coast. And my colleague said, Bill, I hope you'll finally crack the code. Are great leaders made or born? What are the characteristics of successful leaders? You know what? 125 people we talked to, no one wanted to talk about that. You know what they want to talk about? They want to talk about who they were. They want to talk about their life stories, where their passions came from. And they want to talk about really difficult times that they'd face. I remember talking to Dick Kovacevic, who was a graduate of the school, the most successful commercial banker for 20 years. And Dick was saying, I didn't learn leadership at Stanford Business School. I learned it in a little town in Western Washington, in a sawmill town. He said, I learned two things that are really important. I learned at the corner grocery store and on the athletic field. Yeah, he was a very good quarterback, by the way, but he said if you had 11 quarterbacks on the team, you'd lose every game. He said at Wells Fargo, everyone who worked for me had to be better than I was. And the second thing he said I learned at the corner grocery store, it was all about the last 3 feet between you and the customer. We've lost sight of that in healthcare, the last 3 feet between the doctor and the patient. That's where the relationship in every organization takes place. And if you don't get that, you probably won't create a great organization, and you probably won't be able to sustain success over the long term. But about 85% of the people told us that they'd experienced very severe crucibles in their life. One of them was Dan Vasella, who I got to know well, as CEO of Novartis. Dan was born as a sickly boy, and not born, was sickly as a child. He had cerebral palsy, he had spinal meningitis and tuberculosis, which in the 1960s were very life-threatening diseases. He went into a hospital and then a sanatorium. He spent 12 months there. His parents, who lived nearby with good public transportation, never visited him once, and he was scared. He said that every week they would come in and do a spinal tap. He thought they were trying to kill him. No one told him what was going on, and he would scream. He said, and then, he said, a new physician came in, and he explained this whole procedure to me, walked me through every step, treated me like an adult. And he said, can I help you make this less painful? He said, yes. Don't hold me down like an animal, like you were. Just hold my hand. And he did, and he said, you know, it didn't hurt, so I gave him a big hug. But Dan's problems didn't end there. He had one sister die of cancer. Another sister who was very close to die in an automobile crash when Dan was 12. When he was 13, his father died in heart surgery. And his mother went to work in a distant town and came back only once every 3 weeks. And here this 14-year-old boy was left at home alone. He joined a motorcycle gang. He got in a lot of drinking, a lot of fighting. Finally, at 18, he came out of this. He said, you know, I want to make something out of my life. And he said, I want to be like that compassionate physician. That's why he went to medical school, and eventually when he became chief resident at the University of Basel and decided, you know, I think that I can serve more than one person at a time, and that's when he went to work in the pharmaceutical business. And I can guarantee of all the people in the pharmaceutical business, he's the one that has the most compassion for patients and is really deeply concerned about these issues because of that searing crucible experience. I wrote him about a friend of our son who was having a severe health care issue right now. Dan wrote him back, never even met the young man, probably never will. On a Sunday afternoon, took time to explain the entire disease. That's the kind of compassion that we need to have in leaders today. But see, it came out of that crucible that he had. Now, I don't have a dramatic story to tell you like Steve Jobs did in his commencement address here, or like Howard Schultz does that we wrote about in True North. But I came from a middle to upper middle class family. My father, I thought, was a good consultant. He thought he was a failure. I'm the only child of older parents. He was 43 when I was born. He said, son, I'd like you to become the leader I never became. And so here I'm an 8-year-old boy. He's already telling me, he said, you could be president of the Coca-Cola company. He was even naming the company. He said, if that doesn't work, you can go to work at Procter & Gamble. That's another great company. Be head of that. Or you could work at this new computer company on the East Coast called IBM. Well, of course, I didn't know what these companies were other than I drank Coca-Cola, but I can tell you it's a pretty heavy trip to lay on a little 8-year-old kid. You know, lo and behold, I'm in high school, junior high, joined lots of organizations. I never selected to lead anything. You know, I'm never head of an organization, never elected the student council. I'm a good tennis player, never elected captain of my tennis team. Finally, my senior year in high school, I said, to heck with it. I ran for president of senior class, which I nominated myself, against one other guy, and I was sure I was a better leader than he was. When the votes came in, I lost by a margin of 2-1. So you can see the kids in my high school didn't appreciate what a great leader I was. So to escape myself, I used to say I went to Georgia Tech because of great weather. I wanted to play tennis, great academic school, learn engineering. But the real reason was I wanted to go somewhere where no one knew me. So what I hadn't learned at that point is wherever you go, there you are. You may change venues, but you take yourself with you. And I did. And I was eager to get ahead, and so I was going to be, I was going to lead everyone, so I ran for election 6 more times at Georgia Tech. Lost all 6. So now I'm 0 for 7. So it's pretty clear no one sees me as a leader. The very best thing that happened to me is some seniors at Georgia Tech took me aside and said, Bill, no one's ever going to work with you, much less be led by you, because you're so ambitious to get ahead. You're moving so fast. You don't take time for other people. Don't take time. I tell you, that was like a blow to the solar plexus. I thought, I'm never going to be the leader I want to become. And so I took their advice and put my own self-help leadership development program together, talked to a lot of people that rejected me, and eventually held a number of leadership positions in college and in graduate school, and I went to Harvard Business School. But I came out of school and still eager to get ahead. I joined Litton Industries thinking, hey, I can, move ahead quickly in this company. Spent 10 years there, then I joined Honeywell, and seeing here's an opportunity to run ultimately a great global company. And I had the privilege of being president of Honeywell Europe in my late 30s, came back, and I was given a series of turnarounds. And I've always thought myself as a builder, a grower of things. I know how to turn businesses around, but it's not where my heart is. But we got the first set of turnarounds done. It was like a huge bureaucracy. It was a 2-step promotion, worst promotion I ever got. Be careful about your promotions, because this one I was a sector head with 3 groups, 9 divisions, different business. I've always loved being engaged with customers and employees. Well, we were chasing numbers, and there were huge turnarounds, and I'd spent all my time doing that. Of course, we're laying off a lot of people. And so I got that one done. They gave me a second set of turnarounds. And I got that one happened pretty quickly. Then the third set came along, aerospace and defense business, which important business, but not where my heart is. And so found $500 million in defense contract overruns, had to write that off, which in those days was real money. And, and then one day I'm coming home. It was a day like today in the fall, Minnesota, where the leaves are turning. By this time, Penny, I've been married 16, 17 years. She has a good job as a consulting psychologist. Our sons, Jeff and John, are going into high school. We have a lot of friends in Minnesota. I'm one of the 2 leading candidates, not the leading candidate, to be the next CEO of Honeywell when they make a decision in 4 or 5 years. And I look at myself in the mirror, and I'm miserable. You ever had that flash in the mirror? You see yourself as you really are, not like Narcissus looking in this pool saying, how beautiful I am. But what was happening is I've always seen myself as a value-centered leader, but I was losing it. I was playing the corporate game. I was even wearing cufflinks, which I don't wear. Nothing wrong with cufflinks, but I was doing that. I was trying to impress everyone, say just the right thing at the right time, not show any passion, because Honeywell was a passion-free company. And, just kind of be buttoned up, be the man. Well, I went home and told Penny that. You know what she said? She said, Bill, I've been trying to tell you that for a year. You just refuse to listen. See, it's always the person closest to you that sees you as you really are, okay? And she saw through my blind spots, which I had plenty of. I don't have any blind spots. I had a lot of blind spots. So I have a men's group. I went to them the next day, and they said, you've turned Medtronic down 3 times to become president of the company. Why? Why don't you reconsider? Well, it's not a really big company. It's a mid-sized company, But I did get up the courage. I called Earl Bakken, the founder, because I had turned it down about 4 or 5 months before. I says, the job of being president, chief operating officer, number 2 job, still open. And it was. I remember spending 3 hours with Earl. He didn't even interview me. All he did was talk about the mission of the company. And I remember I did take the job. I remember walking in the doors the first day. I'd never been in the building. I felt like I was coming home. What an odd feeling, coming home to a place you'd never been before. You ever had that feeling where you're coming in and you say, here's a group of people I can work with. I can learn a lot from them, and we can really make a difference. And I can tell you, honestly, guys, it was the best decision in my professional life. I had the best 13 years there, and everything has happened since that time, back in 1989, has opened up because of that. And it was a wonderful time in my life. But if I had not gone through that searing crucible, that difficult time going all the way back to high school, and I hope you can see the linkage here of kind of repeating some of those same mistakes, but becoming real and becoming authentic and finding I could be myself and be successful, and not the guy that wore cufflinks, but the person that could just be real. Really was a fantastic thing. So let's talk about how are you going to develop as a leader? Because I think that's really important. I think you want to start with your life story, your difficult times, and where do you find your passion to lead? And it's having that self-awareness. You know, we've had these myths that the smartest person makes the best leader. It is indeed a myth. Anyone with an IQ over 120, which all of you have, the differentiating factor in leaders is not IQ, but EQ. It's emotional intelligence. Dan Goleman has written about that. They have the research data showing this now, that that's the differentiating factor. And it starts with your self-awareness, knowing who you are. I teach some at GE Crotonville, and John Rice, the vice chairman, comes in and he said, you know, you want to get ahead? These are all the hard chargers in GE. He said, you want to get ahead here? You need to let management know who you are. He said, no, I don't think you understood what I meant. You need to let them know who you are as a person. Not what you want them to think you are, not trying to impress them. Not what you want, not what we want you to be, but who are you? And if you can lead from that solid, authentic core, you will have not just a better life, you'll be a far better leader. But to do that, you have to have a level of self-awareness, and that's easier said than done. The Oracle of Delphi told us 4,000 years ago, know thyself. How do you do that? Well, I think there's no substitute for experience. That's why I say the first thing, get experience early. The best leaders in my classroom are military vets, you know? And they come, somebody like Maura Sullivan, you know, who was running logistic missions for the Marines at age 22 and 23 and had to go to Fallujah. You know, she got the real experience. But you've got to have the experience. But then it's not just enough to have it. GE gives people a lot of experience, but they never stop the process. They're moving so fast, they keep repeating their mistakes in every job they move into. So what you want to do is you have to process. You need some form of reflective or introspective process. So think about, what do you do? I happen to meditate 20 minutes twice a day. There are many things you can do. You can go for a jog. You can take a long walk. You can have someone close to you, like my wife Penny, that you can talk to. You can pray. But you need to have some way of processing in your life what's going right, what's going wrong. Steve Jobs had a wonderful statement. He said, look in the mirror every morning and say, Steve, are you doing today exactly what you want to do? He said, you know, the answer is not going to be yes every day, but if it's no too many days in a row, you need to change what you're doing and do what you want to do. As I always say to the MBAs, never sell your soul to the man. You know, you got to be your person. And so I think, and the third thing is have people, a group of people around you. I think you heard that the Leadership Perspectives course here started with small groups. I got that idea from a group of MBAs, 2 from here, 3 from Harvard, 1 from Duke. Ask them, how do you want to develop yourself as leaders? And we decided that small groups, and this is very threatening to the HBS faculty, I can tell you, could be more impactful than having faculty members participating. So we now have this course where we've had 1,500 people go through, and you know, small groups, 6-person groups, including about 400 executives. We even do it in a week now in exec ed programs. But this came out of a men's group that I've had. Those are the people I want to talk to. About, you know, I've had, it meets every Wednesday morning, 7:15 to 8:30. We've met for 36 years. I tell you, one of the most important thing I've ever done to develop as a leader, because these people know me inside out. They were the ones who could see where I was coming from. A few years ago, my wife Penny had breast cancer. I went to talk to them because Penny and I were having a little dance. I was the rational person going to solve the problem. You know, cancer is one problem you can't solve. And she thought she was going to die, and I was saying, no, you'll be fine, and here's the data. And in fact, I presented this data, and she would say, don't give me your damn data with me. You know, it says it's 80% chance it's going to be non-recurrent. She said, for me, it's 100 or 0. But I went to my men's group, and they said, Bill, you're in denial, because when you were, you know, remember that your mother died of cancer, your fiance died 18 months later, 3 weeks of the day before the wedding. You just can't think that Penny might be gone. You know, they were right. I had that blind spot, and I couldn't see that. So who's that group in your life? Who are the group of really close people? Who would you go to? I'll guarantee you, I use Facebook and Twitter a lot. I'll guarantee you're not going to put it on your Twitter account that you just got fired from your job or had a life-threatening illness, you know, or having difficulties in your marriage. You know, but who would you talk to? Who are those people? Because I think you need those in leadership. We had 36 CEOs come back to Harvard for a reunion of our CEO program, and we talked to them all individually. You know what they said the biggest threat, the most significant problem they had? Loneliness. Leadership is lonely unless you have people around you. That's why I wrote the new book, True North Groups, to talk about how you can have a group in your life, as someone you can really talk to. I tell you, it's the best way to develop leaders that I know of. Much better than all these programs out there. They're trying to acculturate you to the GE or the McKinsey or the Procter & Gamble model, because it allows you to be authentic and be who you are and have people around you that can help you stay on track and stay true to what you believe in. The other thing I think is important in your leadership is that you have an integrated life. I remember back in my 30s, I had anything but that. You know, I was flying all over the world, had 2 kids at home, pennies working, you know, and, you know, I was one person at home and a different person at work. And I finally went to an offsite seminar. And I said, you got to take all these walls down in your life, decompartmentalize your life, and just be the same person everywhere. You're never going to have perfect balance in your life, but you can maintain the integrity of being the same person and not trying to pretend you're something different than you are. So think about your leadership development, how you're going to develop your leadership, and what kind of leader you want to become. And then we get to the third question, okay? And that's the most important question of all. How are you going to use your leadership gifts to make a difference in the world? At the end of the day, what are you going to say is really important? What's the purpose of your leadership? I hope it goes beyond just making a lot of money for yourself. You know, yes, you'll pay off your debts. I guarantee you will. I hope it goes beyond just trying to achieve a title or something like that. I hope it will really be something that you can leave that makes a difference in the world, because you have that ability. That's why you're here. That's why you're chosen to come here. Look at all the people who come before you and the difference they've made in the world. Look at this gift from this Bob King, who's just given a gift here to study poverty and entrepreneurship. Think about what people can do to make a difference in the world. And what are you going to do? Think about that. Because I really want to challenge you. And I want you to think about it this way. Okay, you're at the end of your life. Okay, you probably don't want to think about that. You're 90. The good news is you're 97 years old, so you've led a long life. Bad news, you got 3 hours to live. And all your adult children are gathered around. All your grandchildren have come in. I'm thinking of my favorite granddaughter, Dylan, who's 4 years old. And she looks up at you and says, Grandpa or Grandma, what did you do to make a difference in the world? What are you going to tell her? I hope you don't tell her she made so much money she never has to work a day in her life like you did. But I hope you will tell her what's really important in life, because that's the legacy you're leaving. But don't wait till then. You leave that legacy every day. Robert F. Kennedy once said, when he was alive, few will have the greatness to bend history itself. He happened to be in South Africa where Nelson Mandela did indeed bend history. But most of us never will. I know I won't. But he went on to say, but each of us can commit ourselves to a series of actions to make this world a better place. And the sum total of all those actions will write the history of this generation. Well, it's my hope that your generation will really make a difference and lead better in a different way, a more authentic way, a more sustainable way, and create great companies. My colleague Michael Porter wrote a book called wrote an article last January in Harvard Business Review called Creating Shared Value. What's the value for society your organization is going to create? We can think of lots of examples of people that do that, organizations that do that. But how are you going to make a difference in your leadership? Margaret Mead, I think, said it well. Never doubt the power of a small group of people to change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has. I'd like to close by saying, you know, when you leave this world, the only thing you can take with you is what you leave behind. And I want to challenge you today to say, what are you going to leave behind that will make this world a better place? Thank you very much. Okay, let's open up for questions. Whoever gets the first question, got a book to sign for you. Who would like to ask the first question? Thank you.
Hi, thanks for that amazing talk. When you're running a company like Medtronic, which is so devoted to human health, but also committed to shareholder value, how do you balance those two when they might come into conflict? And I'm thinking, for example, of the JBJS issue that was earlier this year about Journal of Bone and Joint Surgery.
Right.
That was all about spine surgery being sort of questionable value.
Right.
And Medtronic's role in spine surgery.
Yeah, and what my successor, Omar Ishraq did is he set up a whole study to study that at Yale, which is known as a medical school that's not very favorable towards industry. But yeah, I think bad things are going to happen. You cannot run a company of any magnitude and not have bad things happen and have challenging issues. And I think the real issue is how do you deal with it? You know, when it comes to you, like this Penn State fiasco, it's not, bad things happen in organizations, but how do you deal with it? Do you step up to it and say, we're going to do the right thing. We're going to pull that product off the market. We're going to study it objectively. We're going to fund whatever it takes to get to the root cause of that. You don't go into denial like Merck originally did on Vioxx. You've got to deal with the problem and say, what's the right thing to do? And I think, yes, you know, and I'll tell you, the best way to destroy shareholder value is to have a quality problem or have an organization that's in denial. Because you may get through the short term, but you won't get through the long term. We do have to make the numbers. You know, we had to make the numbers at Medtronic. But what you always want to do is make sure you're investing in the long term. If you make the numbers by sacrificing the long term to make the numbers look good in the short term, that will come back to bite you, and you won't have a company in the long run. That's the General Motors story, the Sears Roebuck story. I can give you lots of other examples, more recent ones, that are real tragedies. Okay, we've seen one right next here. My role model of a company for 30 years. You know what it was? Hewlett-Packard. I met Dave Packard once. I'll tell you these. He and Bill Hewlett knew how to run a company. Very egalitarian. Everyone matters. You know, you could go up and talk to them anytime. They're wandering around the labs, you know. Then somehow, with 300,000 people, they weren't able to find any leaders from within. Don't ask me how you can take an organization of 300,000 people and not find one person to lead it. So they went outside, and then they did it again and again and again, you know, with a quite dysfunctional board of directors. And I'm not trying to rip on them. I'm just saying, if you don't keep focused on those long-term issues, if you abandon what got you there, the HP way, and you don't stay true to your values, if Medtronic ever abandons the idea of restoring people to full life and health, but honestly, that's where real shareholder value is created. The only reason we created all that shareholder value is because we did good value for patients and we could charge fairly for it. And people got excited about it. Employees don't get motivated just by trying to get stock. At least I found they didn't get motivated by trying to get stock price up. So thank you for that question. Other questions? Yes, sir.
Thank you so much for your talk. The concept of authentic leadership that you mentioned really resonated with me. And I was wondering if you had thoughts on how to balance learning and transforming your leadership style with staying authentic at the same point.
Staying on?
Authentic. Authentic.
Yeah.
And transforming and learning as you
Well,
go.
no, see, I think, you know, we're growing. We're blooming where our planet. If I'm from India or I'm from China or I'm from Minnesota and I deny who I am, then you're not authentic. But you grow from that point of view. You grow from your strengths. And great leaders today, I just did a program with Malcolm Gladwell and Tal Ben-Shahir about the whole idea of building on your strengths and managing your weaknesses. But you got to build on what makes you really good. And you may have weaknesses. You want to have people around you who can supplement those weaknesses. Say you're not great in finance, you want to have a great financial officer. I went to Medtronic. I can tell you, I didn't know anything about medicine or medical technology. I knew a lot about technology, but not about Medtronic. I went up and gowned up and saw 700 procedures the time I was at Medtronic. I used to come out here to Stanford hospitals and work with doctors, some of the great, work with a guy like a Tom Fogarty or some of the great cardiac surgeons here or cardiologists. That's where I learned the business. But I wasn't trying to sell it. But I think you have to build on that base and learn what you don't know and recognize. You know what I learned from seeing all those procedures? I learned what I didn't know and how much I didn't know. And if you're Larry Summers, former president of Harvard and Obama's failed economic advisor, if you know everything about everything, I can guarantee you're going to fail. So it's important to recognize what you don't know and then build around that and manage your weaknesses, not try to exploit them. But you manage your weaknesses by having people around that can complement, offset them. Yes, sir. Or ma'am. I was looking at the line.
It seems like for leaders, there's often a trade-off between being likable and being respected.
Yeah.
Do you agree that that is a trade-off, and how do you manage that?
Yeah, this is a classic Machiavellian question, right? Should I be liked or respected? I'll tell you, you have to make hard decisions. Don't make decisions just on being liked, okay? But I think you want to be likable. You want to be kind and thoughtful to people, and that's how you get the most out of them. But you have to make hard decisions. Sometimes you have to terminate people that have worked for your company for a long time. Sometimes you're doing them a favor because they're in the wrong job. So you have to make those hard calls. And I think in the end, if you do that with humanity and caring, in the end you will be respected and you'll get the results. And so I think these are very tough. If you lean too heavy to the being liked, you'll avoid conflict. And in the end, you won't have anyone's respect because you didn't make the hard calls. So business is about hard decisions. And there's no way you can be in business and not have to make hard calls. But if you duck them or you start doing them for what makes you look good, particularly to the media, that's the sure sign that you're about ready to go down the drain. And you see people get caught up on a Donald Trump type figure. You know, it's all about them. And when that happens, sell the stock. So thank you for the question. Yes, sir.
Hi. You mentioned earlier in your elections how you kind of lost touch with the people around you and kind of building those relationships. So when you were in a leadership position at a large organization, how did you maintain that philosophy even though you may be so far away from kind of the people that were the last 3 feet from the consumers?
Stay in touch with those people.
Yeah, or even kind of the lower part of the people in your
But I'm saying
organization.
the only way to do it is to stay in touch. I mean, at Medtronic, we all ate in the same cafeteria together. I would go and just sit down at a table, a group of people. Be in touch. Wander through the labs. Go out and work with your salespeople and drive up and down here and go see that customer out in Northern California that hates you. Be in touch with the people doing the work. We have way too much administration, too many layers. You should never have fewer than about 15 people working for you. The idea of this layering, we got to get rid of all these detailed layers of administration and put the emphasis on people doing the work, the innovators, the quality people, the people that know how to serve a customer, the people that can build a business in a country. Those are the people that should, and so, yeah, it takes a lot of travel. I travel all over the world all the time because you got to be in touch with people. And you're always talking about the mission and values. You sound like a broken record, but you never stop talking about this because that's where people, that's where they resonate. You get to their hearts, their passion, and I think that's the only way you can do it. If you get caught up in the headshed, and you see companies are very hierarchical. I love the campus setting for companies. We try to do it at Medtronic. Many of the companies out here have it. You go to New York, you see them all in these skyscrapers. They don't even talk to the person on one floor below them. So they get too caught up in sitting in a boardroom looking at numbers, and they lose sight of the essence of the business. I can tell you the people I know are down on the trading floors in finance, and they're Bob Ulrich, CEO of Target, for 14 years. He visited two dozen stores a week. Howard Schultz does the same thing at Starbucks. You got to be out there with the troops. I think that's the only way you can really know the business. Because if you lose sight of that, that's why Howard recognized Starbucks was losing it, and he went back into full-time leadership because he saw they were getting too bureaucratic and getting away from it, and the company was going down the drain. So, thank you for the question. Yes.
Thanks a lot for your talk. As we look out on, and lots of us are picking our careers in the future, how do you think, or what do you think about balancing picking an organization where you have a really strong mission and a really strong alignment with their mission and vision versus picking an organization where you might get better training or something like that?
You have to decide what kind of training you're going to get. You've had pretty good training here, and I'm serious. I mean, you're not 18 years old. You've had pretty good training, and I think you want to look for an organization to give you a chance to go do it, throw you out there. In business, my son is up at UCSF. I was with him this weekend. He's in his mid-30s. He's still a resident, a fourth-year resident in head and neck surgery. He's training under one of the great head and neck surgeons of the world. But medicine is different. Business isn't like it. The best thing that happened to you is somebody bets on you, and they say, okay, we want you to go run Pakistan for us, or we want you to go run we want you to go to run Austria. But just have an experience of being away and getting that leadership experience. And because I think that's where you learn about yourself, and you really have to test yourself against that. And I think that's what really matters and how you build yourself. So training programs sound good. I'm not high on them. I have to tell you, I think that most of them are acculturation, trying to get you into the GE culture. So you'll be a part of that, until you can be a great GE leader. Except you may not be the leader you want to be, and you may not spend the rest of your life there anyway. And that's why a guy like Nardelli leaves GE, very successful at GE, and he fails Home Depot because, he's trying to apply all that GE stuff. I'm not against GE. I'm just saying I think the model is flawed. The model should be, any leadership development program should be about who you want to become. And people that do that well, like a General Mills, do it really well because they are focused on that. So thank you. Yes, sir.
Thank you for your time. In light of the fact that Steve Jobs denied his daughter and took credit for other people's ideas, do you believe that he was an authentic moral leader?
Steve Jobs, it's really risky now that we're calling him the greatest leader of all time because he, like the rest of us, had a lot of flaws. I think he perhaps was the greatest innovator of he was, in my opinion, the greatest innovator of the last 50 years. And he did amazing things, but he learned the hard way. He's, if you listen to a Stanford commencement address 2005, everything I spent all this time working on True North, it's all laid out there. He actually learned from his failures. He learned from failing and getting fired at Apple. He learned what it was like to be an orphan. Yes, he had difficult times. Yes, he had parental issues. Yes, he had family issues because some of those came out of his own family of origin into his family of choice. And so he had a lot of learning to do. But the good news is he processed and learned. And he went off and created Pixar and Next. And he learned from those experiences. And so when he came back to Apple in so-called Act 3, he was ready, to do it much better. But he still could be a jerk. In fact, Ron Johnson, who worked for him, Ron created all the Apple stores, came from Target. I knew him at Target. He came to our CEO program. He's now the new CEO of JCPenney. And he said, Steve knew he had these characteristics, these flaws. And he said, and he lacked, in a lot of cases, emotional intelligence, so he surrounded himself. So all the people around him at Apple had high levels of emotional intelligence, Johnny Ive and Tim Cook and Ron Johnson. And that's the way he offset that. So that gets into the company. But I think he did it really well in the end. And you can see in the results, but it took time. By the way, he didn't spend any time worrying about the stock market or getting stock price up. It took care of itself. But yes.
Hi, you spoke about empowerment, and I just wanted to know how you empowered people in an industry where there's so many procedures and
Yes,
everything has to be done by the book and all of that.
It's horrible. Every board I'm on is all these, we're reviewing regulation. No, I think you have to do all that stuff, so to speak. You have to meet the FDA. You can't put drugs out that don't meet their requirements. You have to comply with the regulations in the financial services. You have to comply with the regulation in the energy industry. You must do it. You must have the discipline so you don't have a Macondo incident in the Gulf like BP did. You must do all those things. But I think really you empower people finding out what they're really passionate about and giving them a chance to do it. Picking out people who want to make a difference, saying, putting them in jobs to go do it. Go start a venture. You want to go do this? I met a young man that had born with a terrible face malformation, and he actually had it cut in surgery. Now he's taken up this field of pediatric oncology to help people just like himself. He's following that passion. He shouldn't go off and go to work for Merrill Lynch, And I'm just saying you want to follow that line of what you can do to make a difference. So thank you. Yes, sir.
I was very interested in how you spoke of aligning public and private interests.
Yes.
There's a new corporate legislation passed on B corporations in California, Vermont, and Maryland about using the power of business to create public benefit without getting sued by shareholders for not making profit their primary motive. Do you think this is a trend that will expand to the rest of the states?
Yes, I referred to Porter's article. That's what Porter says. Business has been fighting society for the last 30 years. We need to get aligned. We're chartered by society. Society gives us our charter. That should be the primary thing, is how do we create value for society, and then we create value. So if you're an energy company, you have to create value for society. If you're a healthcare company, if you're a financial services company, your job is to finance other people to start up companies. I was over at Sutter Hill a few minutes ago. They're helping people get started with Total Greenfields Ventures. So we have that obligation, and then from that, we earn shareholder value. It's not the other way around. If you start with the shareholder value, you wind up putting yourself out of business, and you'll eventually be bankrupt. But I think it's a very good thing. And I thought also we're going to allude to, I think one of the things that's happening now is social enterprise or nonprofit and for-profit are also coming together much closer so that people really get that in the nonprofit world, but I think that those are coming much closer together. And I think you see many of the emerging companies really understand what they're about and how they can create. And we need to create the demand. I think this idea of carving up the pie, I hate what's going on in the income disparity in this country. I just can't stand it. But there's only one way around it. We got to expand the size of the pie by giving more people opportunities, more people create companies, more people get financing, get things started and get them going. That's the future of this country and probably of the world. Yes, sir.
Thank you very much for a wonderful lecture. My question is a little bit philosophical. I think I completely agree with you to be authentic. But my question is, when you are looking for a job and you find you have a lot of interests, and actually you are authentic with A, authentic with B, authentic with C. So you find you are authentic with a lot of things, you have a lot of interests, and but finally you should choose one. How to manage it?
Well, I think that's the discernment. That's the reflection and introspection. Think about where it is you want to devote yourself, and where can you make a difference, and where are the opportunities. Sometimes the way may be blocked over here. So how do you, and I think that's part of what you're here. This is an opportunity for a transformative experience. And I hope that 10 years from now you look back and say this was a transformative experience for me. So it's an opportunity to really think about that. Don't take the highest paying job offer. We just had my 40th reunion at Harvard Business School. I can tell you the people that took the lowest paying jobs are the ones in the end, that did the best financially. People who got highest paid kind of flattened out. And so I think you want to focus on, use this as an opportunity to really think through what do you want to do. And you may not hit it at first. Look at me. It took me forever to get to the right place for me. You know, there is no right place for you. I mean, there's no right place for all of us, but there may be a right place for you, but it may take you a while to get there. So I always used to say to people, you know, if you hate your work, quit. Don't don't spend your whole life going through life, sleepwalking through life, living somebody else's desires. Okay? Thank you. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you. Can I just, 1 minute? Can I have 1 minute? I want to go back and quote you something, the best advice. You mentioned Steve Jobs. The best advice he ever gave, and it actually shows a high level of emotional intelligence. He said, don't, and this is really the essence of everything I've been trying to say, don't spend your whole life living somebody else's dream. That's what I was doing with my father. You know, I had to be my dream, not his. And I didn't even realize that. It was so inculcated in me. Don't spend your whole life living someone else's dream. Okay? The second thing is don't let the noise of other people's opinions drown out your inner voice. Listen to your inner voice. That's what the question you're asking. Listen, don't let other people tell you what to do. You got to decide what you want to do. And third, most important of all, follow your heart and your intuition. And if you do that, you'll have a very full life and you'll really make a big difference in the world. Thank you.